I'm David. I'm 35 years old, and Susan, 32, is the love of my life. We've been married for a few years and truly love each other. Our love is genuinely a solid pillar in our lives. But honestly, financial hardship is choking us. I'm an employee at a company, earning an average salary. Susan is an artist. With her Instagram page and YouTube channel, she's gained many customers for her homemade cakes and pastries. My dream has always been to be a prosperous man myself. I had been working at the new company for about a month. There, I met Jessica, the CEO and owner of the company, a 35-year-old woman whose wealth was staggering. From the first day, I realized she was interested in me. That woman, with her resources, seemed like a bright shortcut to all my dreams of prosperity. One night, Jessica called me and asked to meet at a cafe to discuss an important matter. As soon as we sat down, she told me bluntly that she loved me and wanted to marry me. My heart raced. I told her, "Jessica, I'm married. You know that yourself." But when she said, "I know, but I still want you," all her wealth flashed before my eyes like a glamorous movie. Luxury homes, comfort for Susan, getting rid of debts. I felt the devil whispering in my ear. But I couldn't do it. I quickly said no and rushed out. Jessica followed me out of the cafe. She pleaded. I quickly stepped into the street and started walking away from the cafe. As I hurried, Jessica also followed, begging me to accept. Every time I refused, my mind became more conflicted. I told her, "I love Susan very much, and I won't leave her. Please don't follow me." After she finally left me alone, I continued walking through the streets, contemplating. Jessica's wealth, that marriage proposal, didn't leave me for a moment. Every time I thought about how prosperous I could become, I was tempted. But then I thought about Susan and the love we shared, and guilt consumed me. I walked until I was tired. I went and sat on a bench in the park, hoping to be alone with my thoughts. Then, I decided to go home. I went to the bus stop and waited. I was so engrossed in the thought and temptation of marrying Jessica that the bus arrived, stopped, boarded passengers, and left, but I didn't even notice. It was as if the world around me had vanished. Finally, another bus arrived. I got on, and the entire ride, as I stared out the window, only Jessica's proposal and the sound of wealth's laughter spun in my head. This thought didn't leave me until the moment I put the key in the lock of the front door. I finally reached home. It was past midnight. My face was tired and worn out from all the nervous struggle. The pleasant smell of Susan's pastries wrapped around me like a warm blanket. She was in the kitchen. As soon as she saw me, her smile faded, and she came towards me. She asked softly, "What's wrong, David? Why are you so troubled?" I couldn't look into her eyes. I lied. "Nothing. I'm just tired. Work at the company was a bit heavy." And I quickly went to the bedroom. About an hour passed. I couldn't sleep. The thoughts marched through my mind. I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the balcony and found a cigarette from an old packet. Susan knew this well. I only smoked when my life was on the brink, and I didn't know what to do, hoping to calm down. I took my first puff when Susan came into the room. She smelled the smoke and was shocked. She came onto the balcony. Her face was full of worry. I knew she was suffering because of my distress. She stood beside me quietly and said, "David, when did you start smoking? I swear, something has happened. You are scaring me. Please, tell me what's going on." I had to lie. To protect our love, I had to hide this dirty secret. I didn't want her to think her husband had considered divorce and separation for the sake of money. No matter how much she insisted, I said nothing. While we were arguing, the smell of burning suddenly filled the house. Oh no, the pastries! Susan was shocked and hurried towards the kitchen. I stayed on the balcony, staring into the darkness, my cigarette in my hand. The smell of Susan's burnt pastries, ruined because of my distraction, mixed with the smell of my cigarette smoke. This scene was a symbol of our life. Susan's sweet dreams were burning and turning to smoke because of my dirty temptation. In that darkness, only one thought spun in my head: Jessica, wealth, sin, and Susan who must never know. The next morning, I went to the company with a heavy conscience. Seeing Jessica was difficult. It was as if her eyes constantly reminded me of how I rejected her proposal and how foolish I was to choose love instead of wealth. I felt that she wanted to hurt me now. But I had no choice. No matter how much I disliked Jessica, I had to work there. The salary Jessica paid, I wouldn't easily find at any other company. I had found my job with great difficulty, and I shouldn't lose my job because of my pride. I had to endure it until a better opportunity arose. A few days passed, and my mind became preoccupied with something else that pushed Jessica's proposal to the back of my mind for a while. Michael called. Michael is my 35-year-old friend whom I've known for years. He came to see me. His proposal stunned me. He suggested we go into the business of importing cheap, quality shoes from abroad and then selling them here for several times the price. He said, "David, my friend has been doing this for years and has become a millionaire. He knows the ins and outs of the business perfectly and has taught me everything. I know where to buy and how to sell for an excellent profit." Then he told me the most important part of his proposal. "David, however much money you give me, I will give you 4 times that amount as profit." 4 times. This meant I could achieve my goal very soon, perhaps within a few months, and relieve Susan of the burden of working. This was the halal shortcut I had been waiting for, not Jessica's dirty proposal. I didn't hesitate for a moment longer. I decided to put all our savings into this partnership. That night at home, I talked to Susan during dinner. I was excited, and my voice trembled. I said, "Susan, we are going to be rich." As soon as I mentioned Michael and the partnership, Susan's face, which was always warm, froze. Susan said, "David, I have a bad feeling. I know Michael. He was previously bankrupt due to debt and was even in prison for a while. This is a huge risk. Please reconsider." Susan's words were logical, but the fever of wealth had blinded me. I didn't want to hear Susan's voice of reason. I said, "Susan, he's not the man he used to be. This is a golden opportunity that must be seized. He's been my friend for years. I trust him completely." She pleaded. She said, "Okay, David, if you want to take a risk, at least don't give everything. Keep some of our savings so we're not left without money if something happens." But no, the greed for more profit had shut down my mind. I said in a louder voice, "No, Susan, if we want to make a big profit, we have to take a big risk. We must put in all our savings. Be sure that nothing will go wrong. I know Michael, and I trust him completely." I did not surrender to Susan's pleas and insisted. When I was talking about my days off and plans with Linda, one of my 35-year-old colleagues, I unconsciously mentioned the partnership with Michael and the big profit. Linda, who was always looking for a way to get rich like me, her eyes sparkled. She quickly told me she wanted to be our partner. To be honest, greed had completely taken hold of me. I thought to myself, why should I only invest my own savings? If we take Linda's money too, my profit will be higher, and I'll reach my goal faster. This way I could easily shut Susan up and prove my decision was right. I told Linda that however much money she gave, I would give her double the profit. Since the main profit was 4 times, I wanted to take half and give half to Linda. Linda, because she trusted me and knew I worked at the company, didn't object. Very quickly, Linda gave me $30,000 in cash. I gave her a receipt. That day, I felt how close I was to my dreams. That same afternoon, the company was closing. Everyone was packing up their things to go home. Jessica asked me not to go home because she had important work with me. I didn't want to talk to her for even one word because I knew what she would say again, but I had no choice. I had to obey my manager. All the employees left, and I remained with Jessica. I went to her office. She was sitting behind her desk. She told me to sit down. I didn't sit. I said, "Jessica, I'm sorry, but I have to go home as soon as possible. Susan has a lot of pastry orders, and I need to help her." I wanted her to understand that my life and family were my priority. Jessica came and stood across from me. She started expressing her affection again. "David, please divorce Susan and marry me." I firmly refused again. I said, "I can't, Jessica. I love Susan." This time, Jessica raised the level of her offer. She knew ordinary money wouldn't affect me. She said, "If you marry me, I will buy you a very expensive and luxurious house tomorrow and put the deed in your name." At that moment, the sparkle of that expensive house caught my eye. It was no longer a bribe. This was a lifetime of comfort and security that was about to be put in my name. But still, I couldn't. I didn't want to sell myself to a woman for a deed for a lifetime. I refused firmly again. Jessica looked at me with anger and despair, not knowing what else to do to get me. After collecting all my savings and Linda's $30,000, I went to Michael. Anxiously, I paid him all the money. I got a receipt, and we agreed that the shoes would arrive in the country within a week. Michael promised me that after the sale, he would give me 4 times the amount I had put in and double the amount Linda had invested. At that moment, my heart was full of hope. That same evening, the company closed again, and Jessica called me. I knew this time it wasn't about the house or money, but I had to go. I entered her room. I said, "Jessica, I have things to do. I need to leave soon." I didn't sit. Jessica stood across from me. She knew her wealth hadn't affected me. This time, she wanted to play her final card, her own body. She started making advances. I froze. My mind screamed, "Jessica, please don't do this." She didn't listen. I wanted to leave so I wouldn't be tempted. But Jessica quickly went and locked the door. I was shocked. I pleaded, "Jessica, open the door. Let me go." She refused. She expressed her affection again and said she couldn't forget me. She made a clear, compromising move that created a huge temptation within me. I was tempted. I pleaded, "Stop this now." She refused. Then she presented an inappropriate proposition, directly challenging my fidelity and boundaries. I desperately pleaded with her not to go through with it. But she was determined. At that moment, 2 immense forces were fighting within me. A powerful temptation for Jessica against my deep love for Susan. I managed to control myself with great difficulty. No, I wouldn't betray Susan. I saw that she was preparing for the final, irreversible step, and I lost control. I shouted, "If you don't open the door right now and let me go, I will resign right here. I'm leaving this company forever." Jessica, realizing she was about to lose me forever, surrendered. She backed down. She opened the door. I shot out of the company like a bullet and just ran. When I left, Jessica was alone. I knew she was there, kneeling on the floor and crying out of helplessness, because my love for Susan was stronger than all her temptations. As soon as I left the company, I heard Jessica's cries and wails coming from her room. That was the sound of defeat. I knew she was there, kneeling on the floor and weeping out of helplessness, because all her wealth and beauty couldn't separate me from Susan. A few days passed, and my heart was pounding anxiously. Every time I called Michael, his phone was off. At first, I reassured myself that he must be busy with work or gone to the border to pick up the shoes. But when this lasted for more than 2 days, my patience ran out. With fear and trembling, I went to Michael's house. Michael's landlord came to the door. I asked, "Where is Michael?" The landlord said with an indifferent look, "He vacated the house a few days ago and left." The world spun around me. I pleaded, "Give me his new address." He said, "He didn't give an address. He's gone." That's when I understood. I had been tricked. Michael had embezzled my money and Linda's and fled. I just realized he was a professional scam artist who had deceived many people with the same excuse of shoes and 4 times profit. And now, with all that money, he had fled the country, and his whereabouts were unknown. I walked towards home like a dead man. I felt like a defeated soldier. No, worse than that. I was a traitorous fool who hadn't listened to his wife's words. I entered the house. The warm, sweet smell of vanilla and cinnamon came from the kitchen. Susan was lovingly making her cakes. As soon as she saw me, she stopped working. My face was extremely drawn, and my eyes were red from intense crying. With great worry, she asked, "David, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" I couldn't look into her eyes. I lowered my head in shame, like a defeated soldier in battle. The feeling of shame and sin suffocated me. Susan came and stood across from me. She took my hand and asked again, "Tell me, David, for God's sake, tell me what happened." I couldn't hold it in anymore. My throat tightened, and I started sobbing loudly. Between my tears and muffled cries, I told Susan, "Susan, Michael was a scam artist. Our money, he embezzled all of it and fled the country." The world collapsed on Susan. The shock was heavier than she could bear. Suddenly, her whole body went weak. Her face turned white, and before I could catch her, she fainted and fell to the floor. I went mad. I took the unconscious Susan in my arms and ran into the street. I stood in the middle of the street, frantically waving my hands at the cars. I was crying and begging them to take us to the hospital. Thank God, a private car stopped. I quickly got in. As I wept and worried for Susan, I desperately told the driver, "Step on it, faster, please." We stopped in front of the emergency room. I quickly got out, took the unconscious Susan in my arms, and ran towards the door. Susan was immediately hospitalized. After the examination, the doctor said she had fainted due to a severe nervous breakdown and stress. Now Susan was lying on the hospital bed unconscious. An oxygen mask was on her face and an IV was in her arm. I sat on a chair next to her bed. I blamed myself for Susan's fainting and nervous breakdown. Guilt ate away at me like a cancer. I wept and talked to the unconscious Susan. "Susan, forgive me. I didn't listen to you and I took everything away from us. I'm a fool. Please, just open your eyes and forgive me." 1 day later, I brought Susan home from the hospital. Her face still lacked color. The house, which until yesterday was full of the smell of vanilla and cinnamon and life, was now cold and silent. Susan didn't have the energy to do anything anymore. She didn't even change her clothes. She just went and lay down on the bed. She didn't answer calls from customers. She didn't have the patience to bake pastries. She only wanted to sleep, hoping to escape the thought of this calamity in her dreams. Seeing Susan lying in the corner of the house like this made the guilt eat away at me like a cancer. During this day, Linda had called me many times. I knew what she wanted and why she was calling. How was I supposed to tell her that her $30,000 of investment had gone up in smoke? Out of fear, I deliberately didn't answer her calls. Finally, I went out onto the balcony again. Again, the usual thing when under nervous pressure, a cigarette. The smoke burned my lungs, but at least my mind calmed down. I was on the balcony when my phone rang again. It was Linda. Again, I reluctantly cut off her call. Finally, I had to go to work. As soon as I entered, everyone knew something had happened. My sad and troubled face shouted that a great calamity had befallen me. Jessica, Linda, the other employees, everyone looked at me with pity or curiosity. They asked me what was wrong, but I just said, "Nothing, I'm tired." Jessica, with her sharp eyes, looked at me without saying a word. She knew the reason for my poor state was the very life for which I had rejected her astronomical offer. A few hours passed. Linda was busy with her work, but every now and then she glanced at me from the corner of her eye. I saw that I couldn't carry this burden anymore. Sooner or later, I had to tell Linda the truth. I couldn't hide from her for the rest of my life that her money was lost. I went next to her. Linda was working. I lowered my head and said very softly, "Linda, Michael embezzled the money and fled the country. He took all my money and yours." Linda froze for a few seconds, as if she hadn't heard my words. Then suddenly she caught fire and exploded. The sound that came out of her silenced everyone in the company. She shouted, "What are you saying? What about my $30,000? You told me Michael was trustworthy. You took everything from me. Give me my money back right now." I knew she was right. She had only given her money because she trusted me. Now it was me and an angry woman who wanted $30,000 in cash and a depressed wife I had to care for, while my pockets were empty. Several days passed, and my life turned into respectable begging. From morning till night, I was calling this person and that person. Friends, relatives, former colleagues, I pleaded with everyone you could think of to lend me $30,000. Every time I was rejected with an excuse. "I don't have it. I can't right now. My money is in the bank." No one was willing to help me. I knew $30,000 wasn't a small amount, but this indifference broke my heart. I felt like I was the villain in the story. I was on the bus, returning home. I leaned my head against the window and just kept thinking about how I could raise Linda's cursed money. My mind was stuck. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Linda. Without preamble, she started, "David, what about my money?" With a voice trembling from fatigue and despair, I said, "Linda, believe me, I'm trying. I couldn't raise the money. Give me another month. I don't want more than a month." Linda's violence was felt through the phone. She shouted, "Another month? Who are you to give me time? If you don't return my money within 3 days, I'm going straight to court and I'll send you to prison. That's it." And she hung up. Only 3 days left. Prison. All the fear of losing Susan turned into the fear of losing my freedom. I arrived home in a worse state than before. As soon as I opened the door, the faint sound of working and the smell of baking pastries hit me. I went to the kitchen. Susan was back to work. For a moment, I was happy that her mood and state had improved, but I quickly realized this happiness was false. Susan was working with a sad and unwilling face. I knew it wasn't out of passion, but out of necessity that she was working to gather money again and compensate for this calamity. My heart crumpled again. It was night. Susan was still in the kitchen. I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the balcony. Cigarette again. The only way I could silence my mind for a few minutes. Susan smelled the smoke and came to the balcony. Her face was full of distress. She said the doctor didn't say your lungs are sensitive to cigarette smoke. Do you want to kill me with grief with these actions? I took a deep breath. I tried to stay calm. I said, I have no choice, Susan. I just want to calm down a little. That's all. But Susan didn't give up. Her tone changed and became what I feared, reproach. She said, if only you had listened. If only you had listened to me at home that day not to partner with Michael. Our situation wouldn't have reached this point. It's your fault, David. That word was like a final bullet to all my patience and endurance. I couldn't take it anymore. Linda's pressure, the financial pressure, and now Susan's reproach. I lost control, and for the first time in our married life, I shouted at her. Stop it, Susan. Enough. Don't reproach me. I don't want to hear your voice. Please leave me alone. Susan was shocked by my loud voice. Her eyes filled with tears, and her heart broke. She didn't say anything. She just swallowed her sob and went towards the kitchen. I remained on the balcony, full of shame and guilt. Minutes later, I went after her. I saw Susan was baking pastries, but silently weeping. I went next to her and said, Susan, forgive me. I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm under a lot of pressure. But Susan didn't even lift her head. She just continued her work and didn't give any answer to my apology. I knew this silence was the worst punishment for the mistake I had committed. I was at the company. After that nervous breakdown with Susan, my condition was worse than before. Jessica, seeing how distraught I was, realized that financial pressure had driven me to the brink of madness. She came after me and took me to her office. I was sitting, and she stood across from me. This time she went straight to the point. She said, David, I know you don't have money and are under pressure from Linda's debt. Marry me, and I will pay off all your debts, no matter how much it is. I was already sick of Jessica. I didn't want my life to turn into a game and a transaction. All the anger and pressure I had endured during this time fell upon Jessica. I shouted, Stop it, Jessica. I'm tired. Get lost. Leave me alone. I will never marry you. Let me do my job and never speak to me about marriage again. Jessica was startled by my shout, but quickly regained her composure. Her tone became cold and indifferent. With a voice that was more like a verdict than talking, she said, Very well, David. Then you have no more business here. I asked in surprise, What do I mean? She said, You're fired. You can leave. I was shocked. She fired me from the company. The reason was completely clear. She wanted to put financial pressure on me so that I would be forced to kneel and accept marrying her. I packed my things and rushed out of the company. At that moment, I felt the whole world crumble upon me. I don't have money. Linda has threatened to send me to prison, and now I don't even have a job. Where was I supposed to go? In a bad state, I went to the neighborhood park. I sat on a bench and held my head in my hands. Now how was I supposed to tell Susan? She had just started to get a little better and was baking pastries again. Another bad news was enough to make her faint again or go completely mad. I couldn't go home. I didn't want Susan to know that I had lost my job. I just sat and thought about the sky, the trees, and the successive failures. I was so engrossed in this disaster that I didn't realize how much time had passed. It got dark. I had been sitting on the bench for hours until finally, in the early evening, with a heart full of sorrow and a heavy secret, I headed home. The day after the firing, my life became fruitless interviews. I would leave early in the morning and pretend to be an employee. I filled out forms company after company. My documents were excellent. My experience was good, but no one called me. There was no news. It was as if David's name was on a blacklist, and no place would hire me. A few days this situation continued. I came home earlier than usual, and Susan, who saw this, became suspicious. I didn't know how much more bad news she could handle. One evening, when she was in the kitchen, she came and stood in front of me. With her eyes sunken from fatigue and distress, she asked, "David, why are you coming home so early? Does work at the company finish early?" I couldn't lie anymore. I choked up. I lowered my head and said very softly, "Susan, I was fired." The color drained from her face, but this time she didn't faint. She was so tired of bad news that she just sighed and went to the window. This silence was worse than a scream. I realized she couldn't tolerate hearing any more bad news. In the height of despair, a small way out was found. A friend of mine, who was a taxi driver, could no longer drive due to severe back pain. He called me and said, "David, come and work with my taxi. Whatever you earn, half and half. This way, at least you won't be without money, and my car won't be sitting idle." This job was definitely not what I had dreamed of. I was an office employee, not a taxi driver. But there was no choice. I had to earn money to stop Linda's lawsuit. I accepted and became a taxi driver. I was on the streets from morning till night, hoping to raise that cursed $30,000. One evening, when I had just returned home from working with my friend's taxi and was resting, the doorbell suddenly rang. I went and opened it. It was Linda. With an angry expression, she stood in front of me. She said quietly and spitefully, "Come outside, David. We need to talk." I went out worriedly and asked her to stay calm. Linda was angry, but her voice was low. She said, "David, my patience is over. Give me my money." I said desperately, "Linda, believe me, I don't have it. I'm working and trying. Give me time." This time she didn't relent. Her tone became cold and merciless. "If you don't give me my money by tomorrow, I'm going to file a complaint and I'll send you to prison. Don't beg anymore." That's when I knew there was no other way. Only one day. As I was pleading with Linda and trying to explain, my eyes fell on the kitchen window. Susan was there. She was standing behind the window, staring at us with wide, fixed eyes. Her face was as white as plaster. She had heard everything we said. Now she knew that her husband had not only lost his job and become a taxi driver, but he would also go to prison tomorrow for debt. The disaster I thought I had managed to hide now crashed down on her like a mountain. The next day, while I was driving my friend's taxi from morning till night, desperately trying to find a way to raise the money, Susan made the biggest sacrifice of her life. She went to Jessica's company. She talked to Linda and told her that David didn't have the money, but she could pay the debt. She pulled Linda aside and gave her a check for $30,000. Susan lied to Linda that she could cash the check within a few days. Linda, seeing that she would finally get some money, returned my debt receipt to Susan. Susan's goal was horrific. Linda would have sent me to prison by tomorrow, but now, with this check, I had a few days. Susan wanted to go to prison instead of me, so I would have the chance to stay out, work, and eventually pay off Linda's debt. A few days later, Linda went to the bank. Susan's account was empty. The check bounced. Linda filed a complaint. When I returned home, I saw the police had come and taken Susan. That's when I understood what a great thing Susan had done to keep me out of prison and how she had sacrificed herself. The world spun around me. Shame and guilt consumed my entire being. I was the man who had sent his love to prison. From that day on, my whole life became taxi driving. Every day from morning till night, I worked like a slave to raise that $30,000 quickly and free Susan. One night, it was around 11 o'clock. A woman, about 35 years old, named Emily, got into my taxi. I took her to her destination. She paid the fare and left. I, tired and exhausted, headed home. As I got out of the taxi to go home, my eyes fell on the back seat. There was a women's purse on the seat. I picked it up. I realized it was Emily's, which she had forgotten. Out of curiosity, I opened the purse, hoping to find an ID card in it. But what I saw shook my entire being. The purse was full of gold necklaces and bracelets. Their value was about $50,000, an amount greater than my entire debt. I quickly closed the purse. I entered the house and sat on the bed. I eagerly opened the purse again. The gold was shining. If I sold this gold, I would not only pay off Linda's debt and free Susan, but we would also have some money left over for ourselves. This was a shortcut. Once again, a great temptation was placed in my path. On one hand, I wanted to sell the gold and free Susan. On the other hand, I didn't want to do this and commit a dirty deed once again in the name of compensation. While struggling with this, my gaze accidentally fell upon Susan's framed photograph. She was looking at me with her beautiful eyes. I felt ashamed. I wanted to secure her freedom as soon as possible, but I didn't want to steal Emily's gold. I quickly looked away from Susan's photograph to feel less ashamed of her eyes. Several days passed, and I was like a wandering spirit. From morning till night, I drove the taxi, and my mind was entirely focused on whether I should sell Emily's gold and free Susan or continue on my path. Every day, the temptation of money was before my eyes. Finally, I went to visit Susan in prison. When I saw her, my heart broke. She was so consumed by sorrow that she had become thin and weak. I considered myself the main culprit for her imprisonment and emaciation, and guilt suffocated me. With shame, I told her the story of finding Emily's gold. I wept and said, "Susan, I decided to sell the gold and pay Linda's debt so you can be free. I can't stand seeing you like this." But Susan, with all her weakness, spoke the strongest words of my life. She said, "David, that's theft. I am absolutely unwilling to be freed with money obtained by stealing from others. Go return the gold to its owner. We will overcome this problem, but with honor." Susan's words were the last glimmer of logic and honor within me. It was night. I was standing on the balcony, smoking a cigarette. My gaze fell upon the gold purse, lying next to me on the floor. I thought to myself, Susan's freedom or honor? I fixed my gaze back on the darkness of the night. My mind was stuck. I didn't know what to do. The next day, contrary to my inner desire and strong inclination to free Susan, I decided to listen to her words. As I drove my friend's taxi, I took Emily's business card out of the purse. The card stated she was a hairdresser and had her contact number. I parked the taxi by the street and leaned against it. I took the business card in my hand and dialed her number on my phone. Emily answered. I introduced myself and got the address of her salon. I parked the taxi opposite Emily's salon and rang the bell. Emily opened the door. She was weeping with joy that her gold had been found. I gave her the purse. She checked the gold and saw that nothing was missing. She thanked me with all her heart. I was still sad. I knew that by returning the gold, I no longer had an easy way to free Susan. At that very moment, Linda also came out of Emily's salon, looking happy. Both of us froze. Linda and I were surprised to see each other and froze. Emily, noticing our surprise and that we knew each other, asked, "Do you know each other?" We were speechless from the shock and therefore didn't answer. Emily repeated her question. I asked, "What is your relationship with Linda?" Emily replied, "She is my sister." Now Linda, while staring at me, responded and said that Susan was David's wife, and thus Emily realized the entire situation. Emily, who now understood the depth of my sacrifice, that I could have sold her gold to free my wife, but chose not to, made a major decision. Emily agreed to pay Linda's debt herself, and I would repay the amount I owed Linda to Emily in monthly installments over 1 year. Emily paid the $30,000 I owed Linda to Linda. Linda gave her consent, and thus Susan was freed from prison. All the stories I share on my channel are written by me, and unlike other YouTube channels, they are not copied. So I would appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe to my channel to motivate me to write new stories.